Hey everyone, welcome back. This is our second town hall. Thanks again for tuning in, whether you're tuning in live or in the future. We're excited to be doing this. This town hall is going to run roughly an hour until 10-ish, and then afterwards we are going to be meeting at Robusta Cafe for again roughly an hour or until people stop trickling in. So we hope that you all could join us there as well from about 2 to 3 p.m. So with no further ado, we'll welcome back our two nominees. And this time, if we can get Mark, just kick it off with just a very brief introduction.
Sure. My name is Mark Peralvis. I grew up in Guelph. I really enjoy politics. I'm very excited about the People's Party, and I think the People's Party will do an excellent job at representing Guelph. And I think I will do an excellent job at representing the People's Party.
My name is Matt Dobbin. I've lived in Guelph for the past 4 years, and I recently joined the PPC because I think it's a great party, and I'm looking forward to chatting about it and telling people about the party itself.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Okay, so question number one, how does the PPC platform stand up when compared to other political parties? In other words, what makes our platform a better choice for voters? And again, we'll go to Mark here.
Oh, I get the first movement. Okay, great. I like the PPC platform, the People's Party platform, for a whole bunch of different reasons. Last year, we were renegotiating the USMCA or NAFTA. And during that time, Mr. Trump wanted access to more free trade for dairy. And Mr. Bernier was the only politician to say we should open up supply management. It'll not only reduce costs for low-income people, it'll reduce costs for everybody. Milk, poultry, eggs, dairy, all of those costs, everybody needs to regularly spend money on. And Mr. Bernier's first priority was benefiting Canada, both in international trade and at the grocery store checkout. So that's just one example. I think the other planks of the platform, from tax reductions, individual tax reductions, federal tax reduction exemption from $0 to $15,000, a single percentage, 15%, on money made between $15,000 and $100,000, and 25% on any money made above that. That will save every single Canadian money. It doesn't matter if you live in British Columbia or Alberta, Ontario or Quebec. Everyone will save money with Mr. Bernier's plan. I think that that's important because affordability has become less and less in Mr. Trudeau's Canada. And when you compare what Mr. Trudeau promised in 2015, very small deficits, money building Canada, he has not delivered on those promises. Everything has gotten more expensive. We have a $20 billion deficit, and Mr. Trudeau has no plan to getting back to a balanced budget. Mr. Bernier does. And just the fiscal side of things is very important, but there are social aspects to Mr. Bernier's plan and international aspects as well. His stance on the United Nations, as well as the sovereignty of Canada's borders, are very important to me. And again, Mr. Trudeau's actions speak much louder than his empty 2015 election promises. So I'll pass it over to Matt here, but financially, I think Mr. Bernier has the best platform of any of the parties in Canada. And well, his plans make sense to me. Matt?
Yeah, exactly. And so compared to the other parties, the PPC's policies, they're laid out on the website. They're very clear and they're concise, and they explain exactly how the policies are going to be achieved and why they work. So compared to other parties, they make broad promises that sound nice on paper, but there's no actual explanation as to how it's going to work and what the outcome is going to be. So, for example, the Liberals they want to provide pharmacare, but the problem is that is kind of under the jurisdiction of the provinces, I believe. And so there is also the matter of how is that going to be paid for. So things like that. So with the PPC, you know exactly what you're going to get, and it's a very financially focused party. So kind of everything ties back into affordability, which is the main concern on Canadians' minds now.
I just want to expand a little bit and talk about the $5 billion in foreign funding, yearly planned foreign funding. And we have domestic issues in Canada that need our attention. Instead of spending that $5 billion outside of Canada, does it make sense to reallocate that money and solve our domestic issues, or at least start to try to solve our domestic issues, rather than downloading onto municipalities and provinces? And I'm not saying that the federal government will take over any kind of programs or anything like that. What I'm saying is, by having more money put into our pockets, our community pockets, those purses get increased, and that money gets to be spent within our community, and we can help those people who need it most, and we can make sure that the money isn't being spent on bureaucracy and layers and layers and layers of paperwork, which is what's currently happening. And it's so frustrating, because Canadians want to help people. And when we see needs in our own community that the government is telling us, don't worry, you know what solves this problem? More people. Talking points, empty talking points. So I want Mr. Bernier, because I feel like he will empower each province to fix their problems and allow them the tools to actually do it. Sorry.
Do you have a rebuttal or?
Well, just to add to it, yeah, that we're the only party that promises to reduce the size of government. Every other single party, they have plans to enact new bureaucracies or regulations. And once those are in place, it's hard to get rid of them. So we're the only party that is going to, reduce the size of the government and actually take that money and put it back into the hands of Canadians.
And not in a carbon tax way, not in a collect it for a little while and then we'll give it back to you. We promise 99% or 92%, whatever the percentage is. The whole idea is that the government gets out of the way. It doesn't take your earned money in the first place. I saw a meme, and a meme is just a picture with some information on it, right? And the meme said, did you know if you get paid $100 and then the government takes its tax, which is, let's say 33%, $100, 33% based on your income, 33% would be roughly me. You now have $77-ish. If you spend that $77 on gasoline for your vehicle, how much of that money is taxes? And how much of that is gasoline? And the meme, I can't exactly remember right now, so maybe it was bad to bring it up, but the meme said it was 3/4 of the money is all going back to the government in taxes, and it's actually $25 worth of gas that you got, but the rest is all taxes. That's an incredible amount of money taken out of your pocket. Imagine what you could do with that if you could invest that money, or invest it in your children, or in the things that you need to purchase, or in your business. All of that money is being sent to the central bureaucracy, and the central bureaucracy is pulling things like SNC Lavalin. This is beyond the pale.
Okay.
Thanks. Sorry.
All right. So the original way the question was written, the second one here, was how would you promote our party to a constituent that was undecided? But what I want to do here is I want to reframe that just a little bit. And how would you promote our party to somebody from the Liberal Party or the NDP Party, lifelongers that are looking for a little bit of a change, not what people would associate with the PPC's typical demographic? How would you promote our party to them? So we'll start with Matthew.
Okay, well, if they've been a lifelong Liberal, I assume they're, a classical Liberal and, not too far left. But, in any case, regardless if they are or not, I'd ask them, what problems are you facing currently in your life? Are you finding things very expensive? Do you find that, the government is involved in basically every aspect of your life to some extent? Do you find that, if you've had any entrepreneurial ideas, that it's just prohibitively expensive because of the upstart costs? And so, just really try to find out their concerns. And the reason for doing that is because the PPC can address every single one. So maybe they find that it's difficult to find a job, and maybe that is related to immigration, because there is such a high influx of immigrants that there's not enough jobs left over. So I would explain to them that the PPC seeks to reduce immigration to a sustainable amount, whereby there's a fair shot for everyone to acquire a job. So,
can you rephrase the question, or re-say the question again? I really liked it. I just want to make sure everybody's on top.
Absolutely, yeah. So how would you promote our party to a constituent that was undecided, but specifically a constituent that typically voted Liberal NDP to roll
on the left? Okay, I used to be a person on the left. I voted for Justin Trudeau. I know, and for Lloyd Longfield, Mr. Longfield. We've talked, I know. But my whole reason for shifting to the PPC is the bellwethers. Twitter, Facebook, these platforms are where the public has its discord. This is where people talk. And recently, the last couple of years, conservative voices have been systemically silenced, from shadow banning to outright just complete banning. We've seen more examples of this in the United Kingdom, but it's certainly becoming platform-wide. Facebook, Twitter, and others, and basically all others, YouTube. There are countless examples of people being removed from the conversation simply because they don't agree with the politically correct narrative that's being pushed by everybody, from the media to the platforms that silence our discussions. And when I was on the left, I was a champion for free speech. You should have the right to say what you believe, to live how you believe, and to not be protected from the consequences of that, but to have the ability to say it and say, this is what I believe that we should do, and this is how I'm going to live, and to live that way. But the problem with the current leftist edict, the leftist mentality, is that we've gone so far that we're now damaging people. We've gone so far with silencing speech that if you say the wrong thing, you could be wiped out of the public discourse, off Twitter, off Facebook, forever, with no recourse, no way to get back. And is that what we want? Do we want corporations to have the ability to have that kind of power to summarily dismiss people? And when I started talking about this to people, they thought that, well, they're protecting us, they're helping us. And you can look through history to see that that is not true. When the people start silencing ideas, they're losing on their ideas. They lose the battle of ideas. All they have left is silencing people. I watched in 2015 as anybody who had a difference of opinion that Hillary Clinton should be the next president was systemically silenced from the public conversation. And the same thing is happening now, and it's happening in Canada. And the two major parties, Liberals and Conservatives, are complicit in this. Everyone sat back and watched Faith Goldie run for mayor of Toronto, be silenced in the media, and then sued, and then audited. This is an incredible miscarriage of justice, because it was never justice. Miss Goldie's case never got seen or put before a court, yet she was responsible for her opponent's legal costs. This is using government to silence opposition. It is very concerning. Classic Liberals used to be for free speech. They no longer stand, the Liberals no longer stand for that. And Mr. Bernier, it seems, is the only one willing to expand the Overton window, expand the conversation. And that's why I think anybody who is a classic Liberal, anybody who believes in free speech, should look twice at the People's Party.
Yeah, Matthew, I want to give you a chance to respond to that, because Mark touched upon the social aspects, at least part of them, of this party, and some of the ramifications or benefits that they might have. And you've been approaching things from a very economic perspective, let's say. So I want to give you a chance to respond to that social aspect.
Okay, so like the PPC is a very authoritarian government or party, I would say. And right now we're in a scary time where the current government and possibly successive governments are moving in that authoritative direction. And there is going to come a point where, I would ask the person who is, a diehard Liberal, name one thing you deeply care about, and imagine the day whereby the government will try to silence you from trying to, protest against their current course of action. And so if you don't think it's going to happen anytime soon, the day will certainly come. So again, like I said, the other live stream, the PPC is a very empowering government. We believe in personal responsibility and freedom, and we want people to we understand that people know what's best for their life, and so that's what we want to give people. So
the third question on the docket here is, how would a PPC government change the current relationship with the United Nations, if at all? And we're going to start with Mark.
The PPC, Mr. Bernier has been very clear that he would remove Canada from the UN Global Compact on migration. This is positive because it restores Canada's sovereignty in deciding which refugees come and where they are distributed in Canada. The United Nations is, where did Andrew go? The United Nations is pushing for more and more control, and even Japan recently in the news has said that they won't take any of the United Nations refugees, period. And I don't have a link for that, but usually I do, so usually I would talk about it, blah, blah, blah. But the point is, the United Nations having control over who comes in and the quantities that they come in to Canada is very concerning. Last year, in December 2018, December 11, 2018, is when the Global Compact was signed by Canada. And there was not a whole lot of debate. The Liberals were very, very quiet about it. And if anybody spoke about it, you would hear, well, it's not binding. Why would you sign a contract that's not binding? So the Liberals basically retorted, it's not binding, we're going to sign it anyway, but it's not binding. And the Conservatives didn't say anything until 3 days before the compact was signed. Mr. Scheer finally spoke up. And people, YouTube personalities, were doing long series. There's 20 videos outlining how damaging this potential global compact is. There are 20 countries around the world who refuse to sign, citing sovereignty concerns. So Mr. Bernier, again, is the only politician. Now, I'll be fair to Mr. Scheer. Mr. Scheer has said that he would remove Canada from the global compact as well. But Mr. Bernier is the only politician who has been on side about the global compact from mid-summer 2018. He co-sponsored a petition to be presented in the House of Commons against it, and that garnered 60,000 signatures. And Mr. Bernier has consistently said this is bad for Canada, and I would remove Canada from it and reduce the United Nations influence in Canada. He's also said that he doesn't understand why Mr. Trudeau is spending so much money on achieving a United Nations Security Council seat. I would agree. I don't understand why Canadian Treasure is going after a seat. If you look at the United Nations members on the United Nations Security Council and the Council for Women, etc., and then look at those countries' behavior, it is very, very concerning to have those countries representing the United Nations. And Canada should be following the United States lead in this situation, in my opinion.
Yeah, so I think the United Nations definitely needs to be put on notice, and we need to take a step back from it, because they are, I guess to put it plainly, they're getting kind of too comfortable with the notion that they can legislate from a bureaucratic office in some faraway country and enact laws in places like Canada, or at least that's their desire to do so in sometime in the future. So I remember hearing about a Liberal MP running in Jagmeet Singh's riding who wanted to leave internet regulation up to the United Nations, and that is a terrifying thing. The people in the UN don't know what's best for Canada. We certainly know what's best for ourselves, and so and that applies to all spheres of life. So I think the United Nations, or our relationship with it, needs to be one where it's voluntary. We shouldn't be giving up our sovereignty in any way, shape, or form, and it should be only utilized when the collective action of countries to tackle a large problem is needed. But it can't be done so in a authoritative manner, like with what we're seeing now.
Do you have anything that you want to respond to?
No,
I think great, awesome. Okay. Defunding the CBC from taxpayer dollars is part of what PPC has said might happen under a PPC government.
Yes.
What model would you envision as an alternative, if any, and how do you see that process panning out? And we'll start with Mark.
Great. I was actually at an event with Mr. Bernier on Thursday, whichever day it was, the other day. And Mr. Bernier reiterated multiple times, there were multiple questions saying, will you defund this national state broadcaster? And he reiterated multiple times, yes, emphatically yes. And he said that the idea that he wants to put forward is a PBS style public broadcaster that solicits funds from Canadians. And what better, I mean, I can't think of a better example than that for the People's Party of Canada. If we being the government, reduce your taxes, there's more of your money in your pocket that you get to choose what you spend it on. And if you want to support the CBC, please, absolutely, because they'll have quarterly fundraising drives. And I think that they did this when I was a kid, but maybe I was watching an American station, I'm not sure, but I remember distinctly, you're watching something, I guess it was PBS, public broadcasting, and they solicited money, and they seem to work out just fine. PBS is very ubiquitous in the United States. A lot of people like it. So I don't see a problem with that, especially in light of the absolute garbage content the CBC is coming out with recently. I don't see any reason to support the slant or the news that CBC is printing and publishing and putting out on their platforms. A lot of it is damaging. A lot of it is misinformation. A lot of it is Liberal Party talking points or government party talking points, because I don't want to just paint the Liberals. It's not just the Liberals. It's the Liberals and the Conservatives. And the CBC knows who's paying their bills. $600 million across 5 years is about $10 million. $600 million over 5 years is about $10 million a month. Do the math. It's interesting. Think about it.
Yeah. So I would like to see the CBC defunded, and I think that would actually incentivize them to solicit donations and actually listen to what their viewers want to see on their platform. Because right now, I would rather see the tax dollars, instead of going to the CBC and promoting far left ideas or radical ideas, I'd rather see it go to a homeless person through some sort of social program, or directly back to Canadians. Right now, I think it's they're doing a lot of damage to the country by promoting one point of view, and again, that makes it that's what makes this election so important, because if it isn't stopped, more and more people are going to kind of get indoctrinated, I guess, and they won't be able to, I suppose, think for themselves. So I think that's why it's important. It's a shame to see the CBC go the direction it has, but I think defunding it is the best option for us right now.
Next question. How would a PPC government balance the budget within 2 years of taking power? Over to you, Matt.
So cutting business subsidies that aren't required. I know that the PPC policy is that there are some, indirect, business incentives and subsidies that maybe should be kept around, but for the most part, a business should not be supported if it will fail if it didn't have the subsidies. So I think that will greatly contribute to balancing the budget, because right now there's so much waste. And in addition to that, foreign aid. So much money is being wasted, sending bureaucrats to all these international conferences where, they partake in the glitz and glamour of these, conferences and meetings, but nothing actually ever gets done. So it's a massive waste of taxpayer money. And I think if you, defunded the CBC, cut off foreign aid, except for in, dire emergencies, and slash a lot of business subsidies, Canadians would see, a lot of money back in the government coffers.
Great. There's a lot of waste. There's a lot of bureaucracy in every single layer. And when you're talking, what is it? The payments. Equalization, not extension. I was thinking extension payments. Transfer payments was what was in my head. One more time? Equalization payments. Okay. When you look at equalization payments, when you look at the foreign aid, when you look at business subsidies, there are so many ways for the government to just hemorrhage money. And when you simplify and cut the tax base, reduce it back, give power back to the provinces, then, as I've been saying, people will have their own money to invest the way they want. All of that waste is contributing to our continued financial woes. And that, combined with freeing up business, letting them compete, opening business between provinces rather than having really, really strict trade barriers. Why would we have trade barriers within our own country? We have so much wealth in Canada. Why not develop it? And again, the People's Party is one of the only ones with a plan and a pathway to do that. The Liberals and Conservatives have been in power for the last, time immemorial, whatever, it doesn't matter, a very long time, and they haven't taken advantage of these changes. These changes would benefit Canada. They would benefit Canadians individually in every single province, because when a province gets more wealthy, they rely less on equalization payments and can support their own social services, etc. Look at Alberta in the 80s and the 90s. People were getting checks from oil prices, right? You didn't need to go to secondary education to make $100,000, but you could pay for somebody to go to secondary education if they wanted to go as a father or a mother doing one of those jobs. These are the ways to grow our economy in a responsible way, make every Canadian richer, and we can take care of our own. We can't keep sending half of our money to the government to have them mismanage it and send the money all over the place. Equalization payments are one example of a mass amount of waste, but there are so many others, and I know we're going to get into equalization payments. But
yeah, we can roll right off of that, and I'll let Matthew have the opportunity here. But the question that I had, which feeds perfectly in what you said, was equalization payment program as it stands, has Quebec receiving the lion's share of the money? Why is this system out of date, and what would a PPC government do to overhaul the current system?
Well, it's out of date because, Quebec doesn't really need it. With the current formula, they're not going to be incentivized to grow their private sector, and it's only going to result in a bloated public sector. And this is unfortunately going to give the Canadians that are working in that public sector a false sense of prosperity, and they're going to be increasingly dependent on the government. And to make matters worse, as soon as someone starts crying, oh, the equalization payments are going to get cut, they will go back for them and try to fight to have that equalization formula maintained. And that's not fair to the people in Alberta who are struggling over their finances and struggling to make ends meet. And that just speaks back to one of the principles of the PPC is fairness.
It's true. The welfare trap is absolutely real, and I was doing some research about the equalization payments this morning, just for a video I'm working on for you, Guelph, just to understand exactly how impactful this is. And the equalization payments factor oil differently than hydroelectric energy, and that's the reason that Quebec gets so much money and Alberta gets none. If the hydroelectric power in Quebec were counted the same way Alberta's oil were counted, Quebec would get about half of the equalization payments they get now. Ontario just lost equalization status in 2019. In 2018, we had almost $1 billion. Ontario pays $8 billion a year into the equalization payments. This year, we get zero out of that. We are a province that is the most indebted state in the world. We have the most amount of debt. California is a close second, I believe. And that's incredible that not that we don't qualify, but that we are spending $8 billion of our dollars into this program to transfer that money to Quebec. It makes no sense. It is a flawed system. And as I said, the Conservatives changed it in 2014 to help Alberta out. And then the Liberals in 2018 snuck in the budget bill an extension. Every 5 years they have to, what's the word? They have to, I guess extension is the best word. They have to extend the the equalization payments. So instead of having a debate about it, instead of putting it up for discussion or looking at, there's many news articles, and I looked at them this morning as well, talking about how they can make equalization more fair. Saskatchewan, my bad, has been proposing a 50% modification to the current system so they don't have to wait for the 5 years because the system is so unfair. So provinces that are the economic driver, like Saskatchewan and Alberta, they sell our resources, they get a lot of money. They are punished for doing those things that should be beneficial to them. And places like Quebec and New Brunswick are, well, more Quebec, are getting the money and preventing themselves from developing their economic prosperity, so they continue to get the money. And it's not necessarily we're making this choice to do this, it's just something that happens. So over time, as these welfare traps are continued and entrenched, they become election issues. And if you look at how much money the equalization payments got this year over last year, it's almost $1 billion more. But Ontario gets none, it's going to fewer provinces, and Quebec got $1.4 billion more in equalization in 2019. What? It doesn't make any sense. Is that crazy? That's crazy, right? Like that, it's crazy. So all of this money that's being redistributed all around Canada, we could do it in a way that makes sense, offering the correct incentives to provinces to develop their own resources, to develop their own stuff, and rely less on the equalization payments, rely less on the federal government. And that's the plan. That's why I think that Mr. Bernier can actually do it, because this plan will actually work, right? It's not, that's it.
Well, we're gonna continue to play off that, because I like the direction that the conversation is going in terms of, you know, the haves and the have-nots, the East versus the West. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about oil for a second. Sure. And that's been a conversation that I think has plagued the Trudeau government from about day one, and there's been continual inaction on it, maybe even worsening of the position we were at before they came in office. Yes. So let's talk about oil. What is it? How will this conversation change? What will be done under PPC government that's currently not being done? And we'll go to Matthew first.
Well, I think we're definitely going to move towards less regulation in the oil patch. I mean, right now it's been strangled. I mean, like, for God's sakes, we nationalized the pipeline because of the whole debacle. But I think people realize that, pipelines are not as bad as they sound, or at least as bad as the environmental activists make them sound. They're a lot safer. And so I think, moving with that, the PPC will able to really unleash Alberta's economic potential by, getting our product out there to different markets, and so we won't be so reliant on selling it to the United States at a discounted price. And it's really strangling Alberta, which is, obviously our economic engine. So I think once that's in place, it'll be a totally different playing field.
One thing that Mr. Bernier continually talks about is, and this is about how the pipeline conversation would be different, right? One thing Mr. Bernier talks about often is that he would use the Constitution to make a pipeline go through Quebec and east to west, basically, in the national interest. And why is that in the national interest? Because that's a hard conversation to have. People say there's no social license for oil in Quebec, I think is the current phrase. But here's the problem. $300 million a month of Canadian dollars is going to Saudi Arabia. For what? Oil. And the reason that's a problem is because we're not stopping using oil. We're not saying there's no appetite for Saudi oil. That's not happening. We are paying them gladly because they keep the oil flowing and the gas prices at $1.30 or whatever they are with the current carbon tax. So when Mr. Bernier says, I'm going to I'm going to push through a pipeline east to west to make sure that, or west to east, to make sure that our resources, our national resources, get sold within Canada, that benefits Canadians again. In Alberta, making oil to send in the absolute safest way we can send it, which is by pipeline, to our eastern provinces. And when they send it to our eastern provinces, the refineries out there will create more jobs, because if we're bringing our own Canadian oil, why not refine it in the east in Canada? And that will create jobs out there. And require expertise and experience out there. So it's not just entry-level jobs, it's good jobs, good refinery jobs. They're going to, as I said earlier, give you $100,000 if you don't want to go to post-secondary. And if you choose that path and your family does want to go to post-secondary, you can afford it, right? The government isn't taking 50% and saying, we own 10% of your house. Don't you feel better that you don't have to pay that 10% to the bank? I'm not sure exactly what it is, but Mr. Bernier is all about allowing Canada to develop our resources and develop our riches and keep it within our country and enhance ourselves. What doesn't make sense about that? How is that controversial? It's not. In my opinion, it's not. The Quebec politicians have a hard time with the pipeline going through Quebec. And if you look at the connections between SNC and SNC's biggest customer, Saudi Arabia, you will get a clearer picture of why SNC was a big deal in the last 6 months and why the Liberals wanted to give them a deferred prosecution agreement and allow them to continue to bid on federal projects. But I'm getting into a different topic here, but it's all connected. There's a reason we've never had Canadian oil in the East, and that needs to change.
And a PPC government won't be so concerned about the gender impact of building pipelines.
Right. Yes. We'll actually focus on the important things. And Mr. Bernier himself says it is not about. You said at the beginning that there would be less regulations. Regulations are used to strangle an industry. If you don't want an industry to move forward, you allow every man and his dog to put up a legal challenge. And when the pipelines, when Bill C-69 came in, and Mr. Trudeau is acting as if Bill C-69 is law, so he's allowing all of these consultations, et cetera. Bill 69 may even be law. I'm not 100% sure. I'll have to double check. No, it's in the Senate right now. But anyway, they're allowing all these consultations. But they did change the rules in 2015 to a higher bar for getting pipelines built, and they didn't follow their own rules. They changed the rules in 2015, said we have to do at least this much, and then they didn't even do that, and then blamed the Native American tribes or the native tribes for not. I don't know. I'm not entirely sure what they blamed them for, but they said it's not our problem, it's yours. And then the judge said, no, actually, you said you'd do this, and then you didn't do this, and it's all documented. It's very interesting.
All right, as we're winding down here, I got one more question, not related to policy at all. So, and then we're going to go into closing statements. And the question is simply, over the last year, what book did you read? It could have something to do with politics or nothing to do with politics. But what book did you read that really impressed you, and why? We'll start with Matthew.
I'd say The Conscience of a Young Conservative. That was a book I really enjoyed. I haven't gotten through the entire thing. I'm halfway through. But I've just never seen so many citations. Like every argument in that book is so well put together, and it was really eye-opening. Even though I don't agree with some of the things in there, I did find it, one of the most insightful books I've ever read, and so I recommend that people read it.
Cool. 12 Rules for Life. It's wonderful. It's wonderful. I read a lot of books on audiobooks, so I listen when I'm doing the dishes and stuff. And the insights given in Dr. Peterson, his 12 Rules for Life are insights that you always knew were true, but you didn't know how to articulate them. And if you don't listen to Dr. Peterson, or if you've never encountered him, or if you've just read the newspapers about him, don't believe what you read. And if you have watched him or listened to him or read 12 Rules for Life, really, it's wonderful. I think my favorite rule is don't bother kids when they're skateboarding. And no, that's not true. My favorite rule is don't allow your children to do anything that makes you dislike them, but they're close.
Awesome, guys. Okay, so this is it. We're going to wrap up with 2-3 minutes. Final closing speech, if you will, reminding everyone in Guelph why they should vote for you and what they can look forward to should you become our PPC candidate. So, Mark, take it away.
Oh, me. I get to go first. I refuse to accept what people say. This is obvious. Here it is. This is the thing. I refuse to accept it. I always ask why. I'm always wondering, how can we prove it better? What is Well, I'm very curious, and I make sure that I have a very, very good understanding of all angles before I jump into something and agree. And I've been looking at politics for a long time, and I started as a liberal. Like I said, I voted for Mr. Longfield, I voted for Mr. Trudeau. And before that, I was a union steward. I was not active in politics, but my Facebook feed was full of political leaning things. And I used to have lots of political conversations because that's what I'm interested in. And as time has moved on and I've grown up and gotten older, as my eyes opened, the Conservative Party and the Liberal Party are both talking at the same side of their mouth, and they're not saying anything that resonates with me. And I started talking to other people about this, saying, is this what you're experiencing too? These parties, they're not bringing up the important electoral conversations that need to be happening right now. There's a lot happening in Canada, a lot changing, and the political parties are not engaging in those conversations. And Mr. Bernier's party is. And I am stubborn enough to say, why do you think that? Even if there's mountains of newspaper articles and anecdotal stories that you can point to and back up what you think, I still think we can have a conversation, and I still think we can all come to a mutual understanding. But the poison conversation, the name calling, the Nazi and white supremacist and all that stuff is poison, and it needs to be ended. We need to have a pathway to having the hard conversations. And like I said, I'm tenacious and stubborn and willing to sit there and go, I don't know. Let's really take this apart. Let's really, really look at this. So I don't know. Tenaciousness, stubbornness, and enthusiasm, for real.
Yeah. So I mean, if you're tired with the way politics has been done as of late, if you're looking for accountability, honesty, and just genuine people, that's what you'll get from the PPC. And we're a party made of real people that really care. I mean, many of us in this party have gone through the political spectrum, and it seems like we've all moved through parties we've just become disenchanted with because they weren't offering the solutions that actually needed to be put on the table. So we're a party comprised of people that are willing to have the difficult conversations that need to be had, and we're actually going to work towards those goals, and all with the objective of making Canada a much better place. And so
Awesome.
Cool.
Thanks, guys. I'll just say a few closing words.
All right.
I appreciate you doing that.
Fun.
All right, everyone. Thanks again for tuning in. And I just want to thank Matthew Dobbin and Mark Perolovis for doing this. It's really not easy to field these questions on the fly and stare into a webcam. And it's an interesting setup, and they've done a great job. So I want to thank them both. And again, I want to invite anyone who's watching right now, who got the invite through Twitter or Facebook, to please join us at Robusta Cafe and come have a coffee, come have a drink, a sandwich, and just chat with us. We're a pretty laid back group, and I'm looking forward to seeing you all there. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you soon.